Yes, that's my mother looking at me just the way she did when I was first born. You might be wondering how I, a handsome young lad, became a raging alcoholic. Well, it all started when I found out the wealthiest country in the world is Ireland. Not the US, not Switzerland, or fake countries like Luxembourg or Narnia. I had to go see it for myself. So to get ready, I used a transition I found on a Get Ready With Me TikTok. Please tell me I'm cute in the comments. I'm in Dublin, Ireland on what I'm told is a beautiful summer day. I'm here to investigate whether this is actually the wealthiest country in the world, but first, I wanted to talk to some locals. This astonished man told me I haven't lived until I've tried the world-famous beer that came out of Ireland, Guinness. But before I do that, let's get down and dirty in some economics. So according to the IMF, Ireland is the wealthiest country in the world with a GDP per capita of 104,000. While the World Bank says it's the 5th wealthiest, still wealthier than countries like Switzerland or Norway. For context, Ireland's GDP per capita makes it 30% wealthier than the United States and more than double the United Kingdom. But also, the United Kingdom's GDP per capita is lower than the poorest state in the United States, Mississippi. So suck it, King Charles. Ireland is also consistently among the fastest growing countries in the world. In 2022, it grew at 9.4%, and in 2021, 15.1%. How on earth is Ireland pulling this off? Is there really a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Is the luck of the Irish that good? Are these potato-loving, red-haired leprechauns really that wealthy? I don't know what got into me. Let's start from the beginning. Before the 1840s, approximately 8.2 million people lived on this island. But after the Great Famine during the 1840s, approximately 1 million people died and 2 million left the island for better opportunities. And like all global atrocities, Britain was to blame. They wouldn't give food assistance to the Irish, despite the fact that Ireland was part of the United Kingdom. And the reason was because the Irish were of poor moral character, which, coming from the British, is well, it's rich. To this day, Ireland's population has not recovered. Mass emigration off the island has been a continuous problem for decades. At one point, 40,000 people were leaving every single year. As a result, America now has more Irish people than Ireland itself, but that also includes people who are like 1/16 Irish, but make their whole personality. You're not Irish, Sean, just an alcoholic. Then the Irish Civil War ended in 1922 and the Republic of Ireland split off, leaving Northern Ireland behind as part of the United Kingdom. And this is a good time to explain that the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland are two separate things altogether. And I know it's confusing, they're on the same island, they have the same name, I get it. My name is Shreyas and I have a younger brother named Preyas. We have rhyming names. And my name, Shreyas, is a common Indian name. And Preyas is a made-up name. My parents made it up. That's like if your name was Christopher and your parents named your brother Pistopher. Now, at the time, Ireland was among the poorest countries in the world, but much like Kanye West in 2026, it was able to turn itself around. Between 1995 and 2005, Ireland grew at an average rate of 9%. That earned it the name the Celtic Tiger. And you could say during that time, Ireland's capital was Dublin. Now, Ireland's growth is attributable to the fact that it became an open economy. It's free trade zones with the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union. But there's also another secret. Ireland has one of the lowest tax rates in the world, and it offers a lot of tax loopholes that lure corporations here. One such loophole is called the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich, which coincidentally is what I call a good weekend. This loophole basically lets companies move money from Ireland to a Dutch subsidiary back to Ireland and avoid tax altogether. And thanks to it, a bunch of tech, IT, and pharmaceutical companies moved their European headquarters to Ireland. In 1959, Ireland also pioneered the world's first free trade zone. It allowed companies for the first time ever to skip taxes during the assembly phase, which allowed a huge manufacturing hub to build outside of its Shannon airport, the Shannon Free Trade Zone. In 2003, it ended the Shannon Free Trade Zone, and in 2015, the EU forced Ireland to end the double Irish tax loophole. But because there's so much momentum here, companies kept coming. So is that it? Is that the secret to Ireland's growth? Now let's dive a little bit deeper. GDP is calculated by adding up the government spending, the household and consumer spending, the foreign direct investment, and the difference between exports and imports. And let's dive a little bit into exports. A lot of companies claim to be exporting from Ireland when they're actually not. If you have an iPhone, these are all technically Irish products, even though almost none of it came from Ireland. Apple just says it is. And that's obviously for tax reasons. Now, the IMF calculates that a quarter of Ireland's GDP growth it's just iPhone sales, even though Ireland sees none of that money. In fact, 85% of Ireland's exports come from foreign-owned companies. Now we dive a little bit into investment. What we find is that companies are constantly moving money into Ireland and out of Ireland and back in for tax reasons, but a lot of the money never makes its way into the economy. The IMF calculates that 2/3 of foreign direct investment into Ireland is this kind of phantom money. And because of things like this, the government of Ireland doesn't even use GDP to measure the health of its economy. It uses the MDD, which stands for Modified Domestic Demand. And if you compare it to the country's GDP, you find that Ireland's not growing nearly as fast as headlines suggest. And if we compare Ireland's MDD to other countries, we find that Ireland is more like Italy than it is Hong Kong or Switzerland. And this reveals an underlying crisis in Ireland. If you're part of that 15% of the Irish labor force that's employed by a multinational foreign corporation, that's great. You're gonna earn 7.5 times as much as someone employed by a domestic company. And while these foreign companies bring in a lot of money and high-paying jobs, that's actually hurting the average person in Ireland. Cost of living is going up, rent is going up. Basic Irish staples like black pudding and white pudding have become more expensive. Black pudding is basically when you put sheep's blood in it, and white pudding is when you put sheep's well, anyways, now there's so much money that's floating around Ireland that the government is trying to get a bigger piece of it. It's raising its corporate tax rate from 12.5% to 15%. But here's the problem. 60% of the corporate tax revenue in Ireland is paid by US-based companies, and they're here for one reason. So if Ireland raises the taxes, it might find that it's collecting less tax revenue. Ireland has become the poster child of GDP not measuring the wealth of a country. But hey, that's okay. For a country that dealt with mass starvation, a civil war, and a bunch of other issues, it's done pretty well for itself. RFK once said that GDP measures everything in a country except for what makes life worth living. Not to be confused with the Sun's quote, there's a f***ing worm in my brain. Now it's time to start the real investigation into Guinness beer. Oh, Ireland, forgive me, for as soon as I tasted your ruby red glasses of greatness, it came upon me that happiness cannot be measured in dollars per capita, but only in joy shared with the world, and in that sense, no one is richer than thee. All right, maybe I got a little too into this.